Hello and welcome back to Sustainability Mindshift, where we are exploring what it takes to be a sustainability leader today, including the skills and the capabilities and obviously the mindsets that are essential for success. I'm your host, Brad Pierce, and I am so thrilled to have Drew Jones here with us today. Hey, Drew.
Hey there.
Let me just tell you a little bit about Drew. Drew is the co-founder and co-director of what's called the Climate Interactive, and that's a climate change think tank that, along with MIT Sloan, created the user-friendly climate simulations used by thousands of climate analysts around the world. Interestingly enough, these are the same simulations that were used by John Kerry and others to secure the 2014 bilateral US-China deal that set up the Paris Agreement. It's currently also being used in the White House and Congress. Drew is traditionally trained in systems dynamics modeling at Dartmouth College and MIT. He has worked as a Rocky Mountain Institute fellow, I would say, right? Maybe you can correct me on that. And he is and was a protégé of Donella, or some call her that know her well, Donella Meadows, as Drew says, which is really interesting. We'll hear more about that today. He is an expert in international climate and energy issues, and his interviews and op-eds have appeared in several multimedia outlets, including the New York Times, U.S. News, and NPR's Morning Edition. Through those channels, he's also written a couple of op-eds in the Sunday New York Times specifically, one on building grounded hope and another in the form of an interactive simulation. So we're going to talk about his simulations today, which, as you all know, audience that have been listening, near and dear to my heart. That's why I got into this work of Sustainability Mindshift. And just lastly, currently he's holding a research position at MIT Sloan School of Management, and he currently teaches system dynamics and sustainability at UNC Chapel Hill's Kenan-Flagler Business School, both highly renowned schools, as you know. So, Drew.
Yeah.
So we are here today to talk about a lot of stuff. As in the spirit of what I've been talking to some of the other folks in your cohort 2. We've been talking about this COP26, the United Nations Conference of Parties, that's going to be happening concurrently with the release of this episode. And a big topic, obviously, today is how do we get that level of ambition and action that we need to be successful, taking stuff from awareness to action. And I know your simulations have been really, really helpful in doing that. So I want to start by asking you about your En-ROADS game and workshop. It's highly valuable, highly sought after by folks. Why did you create that, and what are you doing with them? What are you using them for?
Yeah, great. Well, we are really facing a big challenge. I think we all see in the desire for, as you put in the title of your podcast, the sustainability mind shift. How do we bring about deep changes in our thinking that lead to action that address challenges like climate change? And not just that, though, but all the 17 behind you, all these issues related to sustainability. And my colleague at MIT, John Sturman, said it really well. The challenge is that research shows that showing people research doesn't work.
How ironic.
Research shows that showing people research doesn't work. I'm going to Glasgow. This is running. Gone to maybe 13 of these meetings over the last, it's been 26. This is COP 26. For 26 years, world leaders have come together to try to address climate change. And they've had access to pretty much the same kind of research all of those years. But it hasn't sunk in with them and us and the business people and leaders around the world. So we've been trying to think, how do we come up with the deep level shifts in what we call our mental models that lead us to take the actions that are necessary? So we like to use interactive role-playing games, or just interactive use of simulations that run very, very fast. So they're free online. The main one is called, as you mentioned, En-ROADS. And what it allows you to do, if you go and pull it up, and Brad, you've played with this thing. It connects the things that we can do in energy efficiency and electrification and less deforestation and carbon removal and carbon pricing and less coal, less oil, less gas, all of those actions plays the math out through all the way to temperature and impacts and sea level rise. So you can see if we take action, what it's going to do. And very quick turnaround to our testing allows people to ask questions. We'll get a business person in there and say, oh, I heard that if we just did research and development to a new technology, it would save the day. I saw that written today in prominent media. That's all we really need to do. Thorium fission are like that. But Brad, you tried this in the simulator. What happens when we just do research and development into a delayed impact of a technology? What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the ability to make so many different choices and pull so many different levers in the game is really what I found quite, realistic in the sense that, leaders today, we tell them, hey, here's what you need to do, sustainability, you got to go in this direction.
Yeah.
And it, to those of us that are in the field, it might seem more simple, never simple, but we can see the path from A to Z, right? And as leaders today are dealing with some of these issues, and they're thinking about having to make projections and forecast, which your simulations do a great job at, but more importantly, how do you balance the right set of decisions together, so that the outcome is really where you want to be.
Exactly. And along the way, have people learn for themselves, because we find that people, when they have the chance to make suggestions and learn from this simulator on their own terms, they're much more willing to shift their mind as opposed to just resist the PowerPoint list of here's what you really need to do. So at HSBC, Wells Fargo, Macquarie, Cargill, these are the top 4 corporations where people within them have learned how to lead this workshop themselves. So it's not us coming in anymore. They're doing it themselves, engaging other people to think about what's it really going to take. And so many times this is a workshop, but it's also a role play game. And we find that role play games are the settings with experiential learning, like you've covered in so many of your writing and podcasts, Brad, that it's a space where people are willing to explore radically different ways of thinking. They're not just themselves. They don't have to treat it too practically. They can play a bit with what are the ways of seeing the world in this playful setting that could lead to very different outcomes. So we really tap into people's love of competition, gaming, role playing, a little bit of levity around a really grave issue where some people just get overwhelmed with grief. But in this context of a game, people can be a little light about it, and it helps them come up with major insights.
Yeah, and it's interesting to the fact that you have so many voices in the room when you do these kinds of things.
Yeah.
That's what I've seen, which has been really interesting. All the different perspectives that are brought to the table, and a really good. I guess it comes down to a really good facilitator. And the people that are training in your programs to be the facilitators learn some of these skills to be effective that way. And it can be used by anybody, as you said, and John Kerry, anybody. And to be a good facilitator, to allow that discussion and those perspectives to come to the table so that, you're really giving a wide variety of approaches. You can observe, it's using all the classics of adult learning, learning by observation and practice.
Yeah, and what you're saying about the facilitators is really key, because our vision of this is not to have us just go present these tools. We have a 8-part free online training program at climateinteractive.org where you can go and learn to do it yourself. So we have 363 people in 84 countries have been trained, and it's now free for anyone else to do it. And they can learn how to kind of up their sustainability leadership game by adding this tool to their toolbox, either running the workshop, playing with the tool, or actually leading the full game for all the drama that it brings.
Yeah, I want to come back to this because this has been a great sort of explosion of excitement about the game right up front. I'd love to step back a minute and ask you about you obviously you've worked. One of the things I didn't mention earlier is worked for the Sustainability Institute. You've been in the field for a couple decades at least.
30 years now.
How many?
30.
30. Yeah. I mean, so you're one of the call them the godfathers of sustainability, along with some other renowned names. And Dana Meadows. I can't call her that because I don't know her. I'm going to call her
Donella Meadows. Okay, Donella.
I feel like I need to know her personally to say that. But your work with her. I mean, tell me about the story you mentioned earlier. How you met her. How did that all come about? How'd you get into this field?
Yeah. So some of her books, she first known for The Limits to Growth, which was a system dynamics model of the future of sustainability, groundbreaking 1971. Yeah. More recently, Thinking in Systems. Mm-hmm. Then she died tragically, 2001. Yeah. She was my mentor. I met her when I was a student at Dartmouth College because I was sick of recycling as a high leverage sustainability approach. I thought we needed to reduce how much we used in the first place. And I'd been that recycling guy on campus, going to professors like Dana Meadows and say, we need to recycle stuff. We need to use more stuff. And I was judgy and in people's face about, you need to recycle. And I had long hair. I was that guy. But then I had this idea. I said, what if we carried our trash in a clear plastic bag on our backs for a week? Everything we used, beer cans and pizza boxes and junk mail, term papers.
A little telling, isn't it?
It was telling. It was a clear plastic bag. Yeah. And the rule was you could not change your behavior. So you add, to the gym, to the dorm, to your class, to a party, this bag just got bigger and bigger. We had 120 students, including Donella Meadows, on campus doing this. And it shifted your thinking radically. No judgment, no ought. You were just in survival mode. You would do anything to carry a fork instead of use a plastic fork, or a bandana instead of a paper napkin. We canceled junk mail. We drank beer by the keg out of survival.
The old days.
It was a sustainability mind shift of a depth I had never experienced. And I thought, this is amazing. How can we do this more in the world? And this professor, Donella Meadows, came to me and she said, well, there's this field called system dynamics that is studying how to help create experiences. For example, where there's no away. How would we behave if there was no away? What if there was feedback about the implications of our actions? That's the systems thinking framework that system dynamics modeling brought. She was out of this field. So she said, go do this. Create experiential education where the long-term delayed implications of your actions are powerful and visceral. Mm-hmm. That's the key idea. In a complex system, cause and effect are delayed in time and space. Like with climate change, I drive around, CO2 goes in the atmosphere, it warms the earth, changes ecosystems and economies. How can we collapse cause and effect so we experience it? And the idea of a climate model built like this to run in 60 milliseconds is to help decision makers live in the long-term delayed implications of their actions. That's the situation that we create for HSBC and Cargill and all those folks who are thinking about it in the context of climate, because we think this is the space where people are able to really get some of these deeper truths about the paradigm shifts, the mindset shifts that are necessary to create the world that we just yearn for.
It's interesting, that there's a lot of programs and simulations even out there in the world that do that for financial modeling, right? Or business management and business leadership, teaching you how to see and that's the world I came from when I worked for a small company based out of Concord, Massachusetts, helping leaders, because you can't teach leadership, right? Helping them understand and see the long-term impact in a condensed period of time. but there's not a lot out there, is from what I can tell, that does this for climate change or for sustainability. So I was really thrilled to find En-ROADS probably about 3 years ago now, and see that you guys were doing it, and not only that you were doing it and giving it away.
Yeah. Have you had a moment like from playing with the model or talking with anyone else around it where something shifted in your thinking? Has it helped you see anything differently in the times that you've gotten to see the simulator, Brad? Like what's it meant to you as you?
Yeah. I haven't had the benefit, the luxury of playing in a team or with other people.
Yeah.
So and that's really where I think the magic.
Oh, we got to get you to one.
About, But I think I've played with the tool, and it's given me my own sort of insights and ahas. But it brings us back to that point. Interestingly enough, when you met Donella and Dana, as you call her, and she said to you that you were making a paradigm shift happen. And interestingly, the science is coming out today saying that all this work around systems thinking that we need to incorporate more in our world today, it starts with the self. It starts with the individual. It starts with the inner development work to understand yourself as a system, and then be able to then go out from there. And so the fact that you were doing that, carrying your beer bottles, I mean, mine would have been packed after one party, that you actually were making it work.
Yeah.
What do you find is give me some examples of some of the aha moments and insights that you're seeing from participants, that are able to do it in a group setting?
Yeah, some of the moments I've had, I can usually tell, like I run these a lot for business people, even conservative oriented organizations. And I'll often get very quickly people questioning what's going on in the model and, questioning the climate science. And it's always interesting that some of the folks that kind of take those first shots at me or at the model, and we really set it up such that a lot of the assumptions in En-ROADS can be changed. So if you don't like the strength of carbon in the atmosphere on temperature, you can say, well, we could be wrong about it. It could be higher or lower. Let's go change it and see. And so I'll do that. But still, I'll often find usually it's a guy who will challenge. And I had one who followed me like to my car in the parking lot. And he said, I'd heard people talk about this climate thing a lot. This climate thing, I thought it was interesting language. He said, but I think I finally get what you're talking about. And thank you. He had gone from here to here. It wasn't like he just jumped aboard and suddenly he was arguing for a carbon price. But there's something about a different way of talking about it that lead minds to be a bit more open and ears bigger and more able to consider these possibilities. When you get beyond all of the framing within the social media sphere and just have an open, reasoned conversation that's safe and a bit aspirational about what the world could do, to address this challenge.
Yeah, dialogue's so important. I mean, I saw some statistics the other day that showed that not only is climate anxiety and the fear of what's happening to us and it's causing mental health issues in the United States. It was a U.S. focused survey. But then side by side with that was data about the fact that we just aren't talking about it today, and I don't know if that's from, overload of stimulus from the news of so much bad news, it's hard to swallow, or it's maybe we've grown sort of accustomed to it and it's human nature to become desensitized to a lot of the stuff. But, it's something that has
people aren't talking. Yeah. You're right. Catherine Hayhoe, I heard an interview with her. That's her big pitch. She's just go talk about it. And really what we're trying to do is give a context for that conversation. So it's grounded in something, in real science. So you're not just talking generally, but it's also like grounded in a setting that's just fun. It's just much more interesting and engaging. You can get that meeting with the top person because this is such a compelling way to talk about the future, and also hopeful because we could talk about success. We could talk about what it would be not to just see that worst case scenario. You've seen the graph so many times and how bad it could be. We had this big report called AR6 that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change just came out with about a month ago. And it's tough to read. But what we want to do with simulators is explore, what does winning look like? What if we take the actions necessary? Can we create a vision, a big, juicy, fun, exciting world that does invest in energy efficiency and electrifies and reduces deforestation and grows forests and have carbon pricing and desubsidizes coal and all those things? It's pretty exciting when you put it all together and can see a world that works much better.
Yeah, and that you have a role to play in it. That's the cool thing, I think, is that, again, seeing all these graphs and stuff, you're like, God, that's terrible. But what does it mean to me? You have no association with it. I mean, most people don't, I should say. And even I don't, when I see these big statistics about, where the world is headed, it's like, how does my little world play a role in that? And so when you start to play with those little, levers and make decisions and see the impacts that you're having, that's pretty cool. That's eye-opening right there. You're part of the story.
It's right. It brings people in, and you can see the future as a choice, not as something that's just given to us. It's not just fate. It's a choice that we make. And really a lot of it too, just picking up on the theme of the mind shift idea, a lot of this that you say, Brad, about the inner work of what we're trying to help people think about for themselves and as leaders out in the world. Peter Senge was one of the people who pushed me. He was a professor at MIT who helped kick off Climate Interactive. And he thought a lot about the conditions that must be set up to make a sustainability mind shift. He talked about systems thinking. 3 legs of his stool were systems thinking, vision, like the ability to see a future that you really want and be honest about the world that is and see the gap between the two, but also reflective conversation. Are we open to being wrong? Are we open to changing our mind? Do we effectively inquire into other people's mental models and their thinking? Those 3 conditions, if we have all 3, it seems that we could bring about the kind of deep shifts in understanding at the paradigm worldview level. I love that you have the iceberg as one of the symbols of your podcast. I love looking at that because it is the metaphor we use of what we see every day, like talking about carbon pricing or what's going on in the Congress right now about climate is the top of the iceberg. It's what we see. It's what's in the headlines. But what really changes where that iceberg is going to go is that bottom 90% of it. And the bottom of the 90%.
Scary part.
It is. And it is paradigms, worldview, mental model, shift, or the ways our minds work. And all of those deep assumptions. Some people matter more than other people. Some beings on earth matter more than others. A deep idea like that. All growth is good. Technology will bail us out of this. As I said before, the future is a fate, not a choice. If it's economically wise to economists, then it's good. These kinds of deep assumptions, if we don't question them, we're not going to make those shifts. So we try to make those conditions, as I mentioned, that make people open to changing minds, but then really focus. These are the deep shifts in thinking that will be necessary to bring about a transition to a sustainable world. How can we get to those conversations? And we know we can't walk in the door and just talk about them. We use gaming and we use simulations to lead the conversation there to the bottom of that iceberg, to talk about the things that on the front of your website you lay out as particularly critical. Experiential education gets us there and it delivers those sustainability mind shifts.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you. I mean, that's it's music to my ears, clearly. And having met you and having former conversations with you, it's all making sense now too. I mean, some of this stuff, as you know, there's a lot of experts out there talking about this these days and thinking about it. it just, needs to come to the forefront. I mean, more people need to hear about this emerging field. I should say it's not a field, but there's fields coming together and moving this forward. This inner work. You mentioned the iceberg. I love that. You love that. And again, it's funny. The irony of it is, and I will state it right here publicly. I mean, I had seen the iceberg before. I didn't realize how used it was. My wife, who's a guidance counselor, saw it the other day, and she's like, "Oh, that's been used forever." I'm like, "Oh man." So it's nothing new, but it is a powerful tool and a powerful symbol. So tell me about. You said you've used it in other situations, including your teaching at the university.
Yeah.
And tell me how you teach that models and use it for getting people to understand the mindset.
Yeah. So what we try to do is really shift from reacting and to or responding to events. Oh my God, what are we doing about the climate? If really we're just reacting and responding, that's like the top of the iceberg. Probably we would just go move, like all we would do is adapt. And that's how we react to the headlines is, I don't know, run away from the coast, hide. If we acknowledge underneath the iceberg, the next level to break it out is patterns of behavior. If we have a sense, and we now know because of other models, like where things are headed, we can plan, we can respond. Miami right now is New Orleans are places where there's serious conversations of like, how do we get ready for the changes that are coming? That's a good idea. But at the deeper level, we think about systemic structure. If we understand what is the root cause, that's deeper on the iceberg. What is really driving this challenge of unsustainability? Do we know what those key drivers are? And of course, on Earth right now, they are industrialization, population growth, commitment and like dedication to fossil fuels as the main source of our energy. All of these drivers, we can address them by understanding the systemic structure. Then it pushes us to say even deeper. As I mentioned 5 minutes ago, what are the paradigms, worldviews, mindsets that hold us in place there? I love that you talked before about the picture of an ecocentric versus like a egocentric view. The egocentric is one of those paradigms. It's got a man at the top, and it's got all the other beings of earth and women and people who are different below. Like, I am more, they are less, I matter more. That is a deeply held paradigm. Can we shift that to another way of seeing the world? I listed several others, but we try to get people to talk about those deep shifts that are needed. And sometimes I'll just say, we'll show a scenario where we address climate change. And then I'll ask my students, my business school students, what are the deep shifts in understanding and thinking and paradigms that would need to change if we were to enact the policies that we just proposed that would get us where we really need to go? And it usually is answers such as that. We need to see ourselves as part of nature and part of the broader world. We need to see the future as a choice, not fate. That just because it makes us money doesn't mean it's good. Those kinds of deep conversations. We care about 17 different goals like the ones behind your head right now, not just one, like climate. Those kinds of deep shifts in thinking.
And, I imagine, the application conversations are where it gets really interesting. I shouldn't say really, the whole thing is interesting, but I geek out on simulations from beginning to end. But the part where you start to say, okay, now that we sort of have had this insight and this aha moment, and we sort of see now more clearly what we need to do, God, the entrenched systems that we have already, I mean, how to change those, where to start.
Oh, man. Yeah, well, I've been talking about the kind of educational use of this and the broad insights, but the other, 70% of our work is in the world of climate policy and sustainability policy. So you read in my bio that we use these tools with John Holgren, the White House science advisor, who brought it to President Obama, and they used it with John Kerry in the bilateral US-China negotiations and setting up the Paris Agreement. And there, of course, the work is not talking about this in broad terms, but figuring out what is the decision that needs to be made and how can this way of looking at the world and these tools inform a decision that's being made. For example, how much do we need to reduce our emissions of greenhouse gas in order to get to well below 2 degrees? We had the tool that could run those scenarios and respond very, very quickly to people's thinking, so that in the negotiations, if someone's position changed, like in Glasgow, things change very quickly, we could tell people, here's the implication of that. We're changing the systemic structure. What is the event at the top of the iceberg? What do we see? And we could give people feedback. So that's a very different challenge of being ridiculously relevant to what people are talking about today. So that's much of our work, is trying to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, if that's proof of concept, I don't know what is. I mean, having, something that actually helped a bilateral deal happen for the Paris Agreement, which was so powerful. I mean, that's a great proof of concept right there. And I know that you're constantly evolving this thing. Like recently, I saw you. I think it was maybe a post from Climate Interactive. I don't know, maybe it was on your feed, but about how you just released a sea level rise mapping tool as part of it, so you can actually see. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so you've heard me talk about we're connecting policies like carbon price and electrification to temperature, but we don't care about temperature. We care about how this affects us, other beings on Earth. So we're adding sea level rise, crop yield, population displaced by sea level rise, the effect on biodiversity, Arctic sea ice, because the science is providing us an understanding of what will change in the future in those areas. It's back to carrying your trash. I wanted to create a situation where you feel viscerally the delayed implications of your actions. And here with sea level rise, you can see what parts of the world would not be flooded if we take these actions. You can see what would get better. It's rewarding us for our actions.
I can't imagine the reactions in the crowd. You're like, oh my God, I just flooded Florida.
And what we do in the game, I didn't say this part, but when we flood Florida, what we've done is that some people sit on the floor in order to show the global inequity. When you have a fifth of the global population living on less than $1 a day, there are people on the equivalent of sitting on the floor. So there are people in the role-playing exercise who represent those countries, island nations, much of Africa, sitting on the floor. And we take a blue tarp, calculate the sea level rise, and then sweep it over people. Wow. So they're sitting on the floor with their hands like this. Look at on the website, you can see pictures of it. And then we actually go to the developed countries and sweep it over many of those people who are underwater. And much of the game is very funny because people do role playing and they're kind of silly, but at times this is just a grave moment when people feel what is actually happening now. We had a terrible summer here in the United States, but even around the world, and Belgium and Austria with the flooding, and there was in one part of China had a full months of rain in one day. People are suffering. And by creating that experience, we allow them to get in touch with that grief that's inside all of us, but often doesn't find a voice.
So important. I think that's, one of the biggest challenges today. I mean, it's nothing new, but people say, it's just climate change is too hard. I mean, it's becoming increasingly with not only with the amount of the increase in weather events and stuff that people are feeling, but also, the reach of news and seeing what's happening around the world. But still, even so, it's hard to feel climate change because in a time scale, it's happening, slower than, what we're used to seeing happen. Like COVID just went and took over, the world in a matter of months, Are you getting, so I was interested as you were talking about data. So you have all this data coming in, like for sea level rise, and you got the best science and all this stuff. Where's that coming from? I mean, you would think some people would ask, well, how credible is the data?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we rely on the research of the world as pulled together by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. All of those studies have helped us build our own mathematical model. So, it's not our model isn't driven by data. It is informed by data. And so all that analysis helps us write equations that affect, well, what is the effect of population growth on energy use with electrification and coal, oil, and gas, emissions, concentration, temperature, sea level rise, crop yield, it informs all of those relationships. And of course, there's a whole process of building confidence in the models that takes a lot of time and work. There's actually a full module in our training program just on that, so that people can go and learn what are the methods that we use to build confidence in these models. And we rely a lot on comparing ours against the other very big disaggregated simulations that are out there. They're called integrated assessment models. These excellent tools that have informed climate policy for 30 years. All of that material that I mentioned with that module, it's all on our training program. So anyone who wanted to go learn how to create these experiences for others would just go to climateinteractive.org. Module 5 is there, but the other ones are how to lead the workshop, what are advanced facilitation tools, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to it. I highly recommend anybody listening should absolutely go check it out. Check out the website. Not only check it out and play with it, but sign up to be a trainer, because it's free. It's pretty easy and accessible in terms of the time commitment, and then you'll be equipped with this amazing tool, that you can help to facilitate discussions of your own as you go and engage people and whatever that might mean. It's got a beautiful front end. I can imagine it's probably powered by a warehouse-sized computer with all the amount of data being run.
It's not. It's a simple. It runs on a laptop right now, and 12 languages now. So I hope this is an international podcast. 12 languages, 84 countries this is being run in. So it's anywhere. And it runs in a browser. You don't even need the internet. Once you download the model, you don't even need the internet.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, this has been so exciting. I mean, there's so much more to learn from you, and I really look forward to this continuing to grow. And as I said, when this episode is released, COP26 will be in full force. You will be there on site. Looking forward to seeing some results coming out of the meetings this year. We're all holding our breath. It's a big one.
I really appreciate your leadership on this, Brad. So many people talk about policy or science, but it's a rare opportunity to talk about what I think is the highest leverage actions we can take, which is much more in, I'll say it again, sustainability mind shifts, those deep changes in how we see the world towards the world we really want to see.
That's great, Drew. It's been a pleasure, man. Look forward to partnering with you in the future, and thanks for your time today.
Okay, thank you.
All right, cheers.